$40,000. That was the number that turned my blood relatives into debt collectors. I thought the bonus was my ticket out of student loans and into a life of my own. But to my sister Megan, it was an invitation to bleed me dry. All it took was one accidental slip at Sunday dinner for me to realize that in my family, being the successful one didn't make you proud. It made you a target. The alarm on my phone vibrated against the nightstand at 5:30 in the morning. A sound that had become the opening note of my daily existence. I did not groan or roll over. I simply reached out, silenced it, and sat up in the darkness of my bedroom. The air in the apartment was cold, a lingering chill from the drafty window frame I had been meaning to caulk for 3 years. Brookhaven, Colorado, had beautiful views of the Rockies, but at this hour, it was just gray light and the biting reality of another Tuesday. I padded to the kitchen, the linoleum cooling the soles of my feet. My routine was a ritual of efficiency. Coffee started, shower, dress in the muted grays and navies that made up my project manager wardrobe, while the coffee brewed. I sat at my small, round dining table and opened my laptop. The screen glow illuminated my face as I clicked on the file that ruled my life. Lillian_personal_finance_master.x LSX. I was 32 years old, and my life was defined by rows and columns. I scrolled down to row 42, watching the numbers blur slightly before my eyes adjusted. Rent took 40% of my take-home pay. The student loan payment, a hulking, terrifying beast of a number that never seemed to shrink, took another 20%. Then there was the car payment for the used sedan I had bought when my old hatchback finally died on the highway. The insurance, the utilities, and the strictly regimented grocery budget. I typed in a purchase from yesterday. Toothpaste, $4.50. The cell at the bottom of the column turned red. I was over budget for toiletries by $2. I stared at the red number, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that felt like a fist squeezing my lungs. It was ridiculous to panic over $2. But it was not about the money itself. It was about the margin of error. I had none. One blown tire, one medical emergency, one unexpected layoff, and this fragile ecosystem I had built would collapse. I closed the laptop, took a sip of the bitter coffee, and whispered to the empty room, "You are fine. You are managing." The drive to Northbridge Analytics took 25 minutes if I hit the lights right. I spent the commute listening to a podcast about frugal living, nodding along as the host talked about the virtues of meal prepping. I was good at meal prepping. I was good at denying myself things. I had become an expert at walking past coffee shops, at wearing boots that had been resoled twice, at telling friends I was too busy to go out for drinks when the truth was that I could not justify the $15 for a cocktail. Northbridge Analytics was a glass and steel monolith on the edge of the city's tech park. As a project manager, my job was to organize chaos. I took failing timelines and over-budget proposals and whipped them into shape. I was the person who stayed late to double-check the deliverables. I was the person who smoothed over the ruffled feathers of angry clients. Around 10 o'clock, an email popped up in my inbox. The subject line was simply, "Meeting request." It was from Carla Ruiz, my direct manager. I froze. My mouse hovered over the notification. My mind immediately raced to the worst-case scenario. Had I missed a deadline on the Henderson account? Had I offended someone in the strategy meeting last week? In my family, unexpected news was rarely good news. Unexpected news was a broken furnace, a lost job, a diagnosis. I walked to Carla's office with my notebook clutched to my chest like a shield. When I entered, Carla was sitting behind her desk, and standing next to her was Marcus Thorne, a senior executive who rarely came down to our floor unless heads were about to roll. "Have a seat." "Lillian," Carla said. Her face was unreadable. I sat. The chair felt too big. My hands were cold. "We wanted to speak with you about the outcome of the Sterling project," Marcus said, his voice deep and resonant. I braced myself. The Sterling project had been a nightmare. a failing software integration for a major logistics client that had been bleeding money before I was assigned to it 6 months ago. I had worked 60-hour weeks to turn it around, negotiating with vendors, pushing the development team, and practically living in the office. We got the final sign-off from the client yesterday, Carla said, a slow smile finally breaking across her face. Not only did they renew the contract, but they also specifically cited your leadership as the reason they stayed with Northbridge. I blinked. They stayed? They stayed, Marcus confirmed. And they expanded the scope. Lillian, you saved a $3 million account. The fist in my chest loosened. Just a fraction. I am glad to hear that. I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. It was a team effort. Stop being modest, Carla said. She slid a thick envelope across the desk. We know how hard you worked. The company wants to recognize that. Effective immediately. We are promoting you to senior project manager. That comes with a 12% salary increase. My heart hammered against my ribs. 12%. That was breathing room. That was the ability to buy the good brand of coffee. Thank you, I said, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. I really appreciate this. There is one more thing, Marcus said. He nodded at the envelope. Northbridge has a performance bonus structure for exceptional saves. We have authorized a one-time payout for your work on Sterling. I reached out and opened the envelope. Inside was a formal letter. I scanned the text, my eyes snagging on the number in the middle of the paragraph. $40,000. I stared at it. I read it again. It had to be a typo. Maybe it was 4,000. 4,000 would be amazing. 4,000 would pay off my credit card and fix the car. But the word was written out clearly underneath the digits. $40,000. Lillian? Carla asked gently. I looked up. I felt dizzy. Is this real? I asked. It is real, Marcus said, smiling. You earned it. I walked back to my cubicle in a daze. I sat down and stared at my dual monitors, but I saw nothing. $40,000, after taxes, it would be less. Of course, I did the mental math instantly. Federal, state, Social Security. It would probably be around $26,000 or $27,000 in my pocket. $27,000. I could pay off the bulk of my student loans. I could clear the car note entirely. I could put $10,000 into an emergency fund. A real emergency fund. Not just a jar of coins and a prayer. For the first time in my adult life, I would have a net worth that was not in the negatives. I put my head in my hands and let out a shaky breath. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up and down the hallway. Instead, I opened my spreadsheet, created a new tab, and typed in the number. Seeing it in the grid made it real. It was not a dream. It was safety. But as I drove home that evening, the euphoria began to curdle into something else, anxiety. I merged onto the highway, the setting sun casting long, orange shadows across the dashboard. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I had a sudden, irrational thought. Do not get into an accident. Do not die before you cash that check. Then came the second thought. The darker one. The one inherited from years of growing up in the Stewart household. Do not jinx it. In my family, good fortune was treated with suspicion. If you found a $20 bill, you expected to lose a tire the next day. If you got a promotion, someone else got sick. We were not people who won. We were people who survived. This kind of money felt dangerous. It felt like a spotlight had been turned on me, and I knew from experience that visibility was a trap. I decided right then, as I took the exit toward my apartment complex, that I would be careful, I would be smart. This money was not for vacations. It was not for clothes. It was for armor. I was going to build a wall of financial security so high that nothing could hurt me again, and I would not tell anyone. That resolution lasted exactly 3 days. Sunday arrived with the gray, heavy clouds, typical of a Colorado afternoon. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was a non-negotiable event. My mother, Diane, believed that if we all ate roast beef together once a week, we were a happy family, regardless of the tensions simmering beneath the surface. I parked my car in the driveway behind my father's truck. As I walked up the path, I saw my sister's minivan parked on the street. It was dirty, cluttered with fast food wrappers visible through the window. Megan was 3 years older than me, married to Jason, and the mother of 2 children, Ethan, who was 7, and Chloe, who was 4. I took a deep breath, fixed a smile on my face, and opened the front door. "Hi, Mom," I called out. "Lillian!" Diane appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron. She was a small woman with hair that was dyed a shade of blonde too bright for her complexion. She hugged me, smelling of onions and potpourri. "You look tired. Are you eating enough?" "I am fine, Mom," I said, pulling away. "Just busy. Your father is in the living room with Jason." She said, "Megan is in the bathroom with Chloe. Crisis with a potty accident." Again, I walked into the living room. My father, Robert, was sitting in his recliner, watching a golf tournament with the volume turned up too high. Jason, my brother-in-law, sat on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. Jason was a nice enough guy, but he always looked exhausted, as if life was a riddle he was too tired to solve. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, Jason," I said. Robert grunted, not looking away from the screen. "Hey, kid." Jason looked up and gave me a weak smile. "Hey, Lillian. Good week?" "Same old," I said. Suddenly, the hallway door banged open, and Megan marched in, holding Chloe by the hand. Megan looked like a storm cloud. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing yoga pants that had seen better days. I swear, if this child does not learn to tell me she needs to go before it is an emergency, I am going to lose my mind. Megan announced to the room. She looked at me. "Oh, hi, Lillian. Must be nice to walk in here with clean clothes and silence." "Hi, Megan," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Good to see you too." "Dinner is ready," Diane called from the kitchen. We gathered around the oval oak table that had dominated the dining room since I was a child. The roast beef was dry, the mashed potatoes were lumpy, and the green beans were overcooked. Just like always, it was the taste of home. For the first 10 minutes, the conversation was dominated by the children. Ethan wanted to talk about Minecraft, and Chloe wanted to bang her spoon against the table. Megan corrected them half-heartedly while complaining to the table at large. "The daycare raised their rates again," Megan said, stabbing a piece of potato. "Another $50 a month. I do not know where they think we are getting this money. It is criminal." Diane agreed, spooning more gravy onto Robert's plate. "And the grocery bill?" Megan continued. "I spent $300 this week, and I feel like we have nothing in the fridge. Jason's hours got cut at the warehouse, too." Jason looked down at his plate. "It is just temporary." "Meg, seasonal shift." "Well, the bills are not temporary," Megan snapped. She looked at me across the table. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. "You look like you got a haircut. Expensive?" I trimmed it myself. "Actually," I said. Megan scoffed. "Of course you did. You always have to be perfect. Do you not?" "Let us not argue," Robert said, speaking for the first time. "Let us eat." The table went quiet for a moment, save for the scraping of forks. I focused on my food, trying to make myself invisible. I had played this role for years, the quiet one, the one who did not cause trouble, the one who absorbed the family's anxiety without reflecting it back. "So, Lillian," Diane said, her voice bright and probing, "anything new at work? You have been working so late recently." I hesitated. I chewed a piece of beef slowly. I wanted to share my news. I wanted my parents to be proud of me. I wanted, just for a moment, to be the daughter who brought home a victory instead of just the daughter who did not bring home problems. "It has been good," I said cautiously. "Actually, I got a promotion on Tuesday." Diane dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "A promotion? Why did you not say anything? That is great." "Lillian," Jason said, sounding genuinely pleased. "What kind of promotion?" Robert asked. "Looking interested now, Senior Project Manager." I said, "It comes with a raise." "How much of a raise?" Megan asked instantly. "Enough to help." I said, dodging the question. Diane was beaming. I knew it. I knew all that hard work would pay off. She looked around the table. We should celebrate. Maybe we can all go out for dinner next week. Your treat. Obviously, she teased. I forced a laugh. Maybe. I really want to focus on paying down my loans first. Mom. Oh, come on, Diane said, waving her hand. You have to enjoy life a little. Besides, it is not just the raise, is it? I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. What do you mean? Diane smirked, looking like the cat that had caught the canary. I saw the email notification on your phone when you left it on the counter to help me with the salad. My stomach dropped. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom, you looked at my phone? It lit up. I could not help it, Diane said, defensiveness creeping into her tone. It said something about a performance bonus. The table went silent. Megan stopped chewing. She put her fork down slowly. A bonus? Megan asked. Her voice was quiet, dangerous. It is just a one-time thing. I said quickly, it is for a project I saved. It is going straight to the bank. How much? Robert asked. He was not asking casually. He was asking as the patriarch who believed he had a right to know the inventory of his tribe. Dad, it really is not. Diane cut me off. She looked around the table, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and gossip. It said $40,000. The silence that followed was heavy. It sucked the air out of the room. I heard the clock ticking on the wall. I saw Jason's eyes go wide. I saw Robert lean back in his chair, a low whistle escaping his lips. But mostly, I saw Megan. Her face went through a complex series of contortions. First shock, then disbelief, and then a hardening. Her eyes narrowed, and her mouth twisted into a brittle, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. $40,000. Megan repeated. She said the words as if they tasted sour. It is pre-tax, I stammered, feeling like I had to apologize. I felt like I had been caught doing something illegal. After taxes and everything. It is not— Oh, stop it, Megan snapped. She laughed. A harsh, barking sound. You just got handed $40,000 and you are trying to minimize it? Do you have any idea what I could do with $40,000? It is for my student loans. Megan, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I have $60,000 in debt. This barely covers half of it. Megan shook her head, looking at Jason. Can you believe this? She sits there in her quiet apartment. No kids, no responsibilities, and she gets a windfall like that. Megan, Diane said, half scolding, but lacking any real heat. Be happy for your sister. I am happy, Megan said. She picked up her wine glass and took a large gulp. I am thrilled. It must be nice not to have kids to bleed you dry. It must be nice to have your biggest worry be which high-yield savings account to use. It is not like that. I said, I worked for this. I worked nights and weekends for 6 months. And we do not work? Megan challenged. Raising 2 kids is not work? Managing a household on 1.5 salaries is not work? That is not what I meant. I said, so what are you going to do with it? Megan asked, leaning over the table. Her gaze was intrusive, violating. Are you really going to just hoard it? All that money just for yourself? I am going to pay my debts, I said firmly. That is not hoarding. That is being responsible. Megan rolled her eyes. Responsible, right. Because we are all just irresponsible screw-ups. Is that it? I did not say that. You did not have to, Megan muttered. The rest of the dinner was agonizing. The air was thick with unsaid things. Diane tried to pivot the conversation to the weather. But the energy had shifted. Robert kept looking at me with a strange expression. Calculating. Jason just looked sad. Megan ignored me completely, focusing all her attention on feeding Chloe. But every few minutes she would mutter something about rich aunts or lucky breaks. When it was finally time to leave, I felt like I was escaping a burning building. I hugged my parents goodbye at the door. Congratulations again. Sweetie, Diane whispered. But you know, your sister is having a really hard time. Just keep that in mind. I stiffened. I love you. Mom, I said, and walked out. The drive home was dark. The mountains were invisible against the black sky. I turned off the radio. I needed silence. I replayed the dinner conversation in my head. Over and over, I analyzed Megan's tone. I knew that tone. I had heard it when we were teenagers and she wanted to borrow my car. I had heard it when she needed money for her wedding dress deposit because she had overspent on the venue. It was the tone of entitlement. It was the tone of someone who believed that the world owed them something, and by extension, I owed them something. I thought about the times I had lent Megan money in the past. $500 for a car repair 3 years ago, never repaid. $200 for a vet bill, never mentioned again. I had always let it slide because it was easier than fighting, and because the amounts were small enough to absorb, but $40,000 was not small. $40,000 was a life. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, the dread was a physical weight in my gut. I felt nauseous. I stripped off my work clothes and put on my pajamas, needing to feel soft fabric against my skin. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I sat down at my table and opened my laptop. I needed to see the spreadsheet. I needed to see the rows and columns. I needed to remind myself that the money was mine, that it had a job to do, that it was already spoken for. I typed student loan payoff strategy in bold at the top of a new tab. My phone, which was sitting face up on the table, lit up. The screen glowed bright in the dim room. It was a text message, a long one. I stared at the name on the screen. Megan. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm. I did not want to read it. I knew what it was going to say, but I could not look away. I picked up the phone. We need to talk about your bonus. I have kids. And this is bigger than just you. I read the words twice. Bigger than just you. I set the phone down. I looked around my small, quiet apartment. I looked at the spreadsheet where I had calculated my freedom. And for the first time, I realized that freedom was going to cost me a lot more than money. The war had started. The next morning, the text was still there. Sitting like a landmine on my lock screen, I had not replied. I had barely slept. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, rehearsing arguments in my head, building defenses against attacks that hadn't happened yet. I went to work, but my focus was shattered. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I managed to get through a status meeting with Carla, nodding at the right times, but my mind was miles away. Sitting at a coffee shop table with my sister, around noon, another text came through. Megan, did you get my text? We need to meet. Today. I typed back, my fingers feeling clumsy. I am at work. Can't talk. Megan. After work then. The coffee shop on Elm. 5:30. Don't be late. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. I spent the afternoon in a fog of anxiety. I considered not going. I considered telling her I was sick, or that I had to work late. But I knew Megan, if I dodged her, she would show up at my apartment. Or worse, she would show up here, at Northbridge. She had no boundaries when she felt righteous, and right now, she felt the righteousness of a mother protecting her cubs. At 5 o'clock, I shut down my computer. I walked to my car. The drive to the coffee shop on Elm Street took 15 minutes. It was a neutral ground. Halfway between my apartment and her suburban development, I arrived early. I always arrived early. I ordered a black tea and sat in the corner. Facing the door, I wanted to see her coming. I wanted to be prepared. I pulled out my notebook. I wrote down 3 bullet points. The money is for debt. I cannot give her half. I love her. But this is my future. I stared at the words. They seemed reasonable. They seemed logical. But logic had never worked on Megan. At 5:35, the door opened. Megan walked in. She looked flustered. Her coat unbuttoned. Her hair windblown. She spotted me instantly and marched over. She didn't order anything. She just pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down heavily. "You are hard to get a hold of," she said. "No greeting?" I was working. "Megan," I said quietly, She sighed and rubbed her temples. Whatever. Look, I don't want to fight. I am stressed. Lillian, Jason is stressed. The kids can feel it. I am sorry things are tough. I said, I really am. Are you? She asked. She looked at me, her eyes searching. Because yesterday, you seemed pretty smug about your little windfall. I was not smug. I was in shock. Megan waved a hand dismissively. Look, let's cut to the chase. I have been doing some math. Jason and I stayed up half the night talking about it. My stomach tightened. You did math on my bonus? We did math on what the family needs. Megan corrected. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Listen, Lillian, you have always been the smart one, the saver. You are good at handling money. You will always land on your feet. You could live in a cardboard box and still have a 401k. I frowned. That is not a compliment. Megan, it is, she insisted. It means you are going to be fine, no matter what. But us? We are drowning. She started listing them on her fingers. The car needs a new transmission. That is $2,000 right there. Ethan needs braces soon. That is another $4,000. We are behind on the mortgage. The credit cards are maxed out because of the medical bills from when Chloe had that ear infection. She paused. Taking a breath, I listened, feeling a mix of sympathy and defensiveness. I knew they struggled. I knew the economy was hard on single-income families. But I also knew Megan bought new clothes constantly. I knew they went on vacations they couldn't afford. So here's the thing, Megan said, her voice steadying. She looked me dead in the eye. We need $20,000. I choked on my tea. I put the cup down, coughing. What? 20,000, she repeated calmly. Half. It is only fair. Fair? I whispered. Megan, how is that fair? Because I have kids, she hissed, leaning closer. I am raising the next generation of this family. You are just you. You don't have anyone depending on you. This money should help the family, not just sit in your savings app gathering dust. I stared at her. The entitlement was so pure, so absolute. It was almost breathtaking. She didn't see it as asking for a favor. She saw it as collecting a tax. Megan, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking, I have $60,000 in student loans. I drive a 10-year-old car that shakes when I go over 50. I have 0 retirement savings. So? She countered. You have a career. You have promotions. You have a future. We are stuck. I am not giving you $20,000. I said. The words came out harder than I intended. Megan's face darkened. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Excuse me? I cannot do it. I said, I need to pay off my debt. This is my chance to get out of the hole. She sat back, crossing her arms. So you are saying no? Just like that? To your own niece and nephew? I am saying I cannot give you half my bonus. I said. I took a deep breath. Look, I want to help. I can give you... I did the math quickly in my head. I can give you $2,000 as a gift to help with the car. Megan laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. 2,000? You are offering me crumbs? It is $2,000. Megan, that is a lot of money. It is 5%, she snapped. You get 40,000 and you toss me 2,000 like I am a beggar? I am not... You know what this is? She interrupted, her voice rising. People in the coffee shop started to turn their heads. This is you hating the fact that I have a life. You have always been jealous. You have always been secretly resentful that you have to watch the kids sometimes. That is not true. I protested. I love the kids. Oh, please. You treat them like burdens. And now, when you have the chance to actually change their lives, to make sure they have what they need, you choose yourself. You choose your precious bank account. Megan, lower your voice. I pleaded. I will not lower my voice, she shouted. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You are selfish. Lillian, you are cold and you are obsessed with money. You always have been. Everyone was looking at us now. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, a burning humiliation that made my eyes water. I am offering you help, I said, my voice breaking. You are offering me an insult. She spat. Keep your money. I hope it keeps you warm at night, because you are going to be very lonely. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the coffee shop, the bell jingling cheerfully behind her. I sat there, frozen. I could feel the eyes of the other patrons on me. I saw a woman at the next table shake her head slightly. I didn't know if she was judging me or Megan. I left 5 minutes later. I drove home in silence. I felt hollowed out. I thought the worst was over. I thought the explosion had happened and now there would be silence. I was wrong. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat. The Stewart clan. Megan. Just had a lovely chat with Lillian. Apparently, she thinks her student loans are more important than Ethan's teeth or keeping a roof over our heads, offered me pocket change, and laughed at the idea of really helping. I stared at the screen. My hands shook. Laughed? I never laughed. A moment later, a message from my father appeared. Robert. Lillian. Is this true? We raised you better than to turn your back on family. Then Diane. Diane. Oh, Lillian. Blessings are meant to be shared. Please don't be like this. You are breaking my heart. I typed a response, then deleted it. I typed another, then deleted that too. There was no way to explain. They had already decided on the narrative. I was the villain. I was the miser. I put the phone down on the couch and walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot lights. I felt a wave of isolation so profound it nearly brought me to my knees. I needed to talk to someone sane, someone who didn't share my DNA. I picked up my phone and called Naomi Kim. Naomi was a coworker, a friend, the only person at Northbridge who knew about my anxieties. She answered on the second ring. Hey, superstar. Spending that cash yet? I burst into tears. Whoa. Hey, what happened? Naomi asked, her voice instantly serious. I told her everything. The dinner, the text, the coffee shop, the demand for $20,000, the group chat. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Lillian, Naomi said finally, her voice hard. That is insane. They are making me feel like a monster. I sobbed. Maybe I should just give it to them. Maybe they need it more. Stop, Naomi said. Listen to me. I have a question for you. Okay, I sniffed. If a stranger walked up to you on the street, told you they had kids in debt, and demanded half your paycheck, what would you say? I would say no. Obviously. Naomi's voice was gentle but piercing. Then why is it okay just because you share a last name? If they love you, they shouldn't be robbing you. The question hung in the air. If this were a stranger, it made me realize how warped the mirror was that I had been looking into. I wasn't the monster. I was the prey. I wiped my eyes. You are right. Hold the line. Lillian. Naomi said, do not give them a cent until they learn how to ask. And honestly, even then, I hung up the phone. I felt exhausted, drained, and sad. But I also felt a tiny spark of something else, anger. I picked up the phone one last time. I opened the group chat. I didn't defend myself. I didn't apologize. I simply muted the conversation. Then I went to my laptop, opened my spreadsheet, and initiated a transfer. To Student Loan Servicer. Amount, $15,000. I clicked Submit. The money was gone. Let them fight over a ghost. The fluorescent lights of the office seemed to buzz with a particular intensity that Tuesday. Matching the hum of anxiety vibrating beneath my skin, the clock on my monitor read 4:45 in the afternoon. I had 45 minutes before I had to leave to meet Megan. And I had spent the last hour staring at a project timeline without actually seeing it. My stomach felt like I had swallowed a stone. I knew this meeting was not just a casual coffee date. Megan had used her serious voice in the text messages, the tone she reserved for crises and confrontations. I opened a blank document on my screen and typed out a few phrases. Rehearsing what I wanted to say. I love you and the kids. I have my own financial goals. I can help a little, but I cannot fund your lifestyle. I deleted the last one. It was too aggressive. I typed, I have student loans that are suffocating me. I stared at the words. They were true, but in the court of family opinion, truth rarely mattered as much as emotion. To Megan, my loans were abstract numbers on a screen. Her problems, the leaking roof, the growing children, the car that made a rattling noise, were tangible, loud, and immediate. I packed my bag at 5 o'clock sharp. I drove to the coffee shop on Elm Street, a mid-range place called the Roasted Bean that sat awkwardly between my quiet apartment complex and Megan's sprawling, chaotic suburban neighborhood. It was neutral ground, or at least, that was what I told myself. I arrived 20 minutes early. I ordered a chamomile tea, hoping it would settle my nerves, and found a table in the back corner. I wanted a wall behind me. I wanted to see the door. I pulled out my notebook and my pen, clutching them like talismans. I checked my bank account on my phone one more time, staring at the pending deposit notification. $40,000. It was real. It was mine. But as I watched the door, I felt the old, familiar guilt creeping in. I was the little sister. I was the one who was supposed to be easy, the one who didn't cause waves. Saying no to Megan felt like breaking a law of physics. The door chimed at 5:35. Megan blew in like a gust of wind. She looked frayed. Her coat was unbuttoned, revealing a stained t-shirt, and her hair was escaping from a messy clip. She looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from years of putting everyone else first. My heart softened instantly. This was my big sister. She had braided my hair when we were kids. She had defended me from bullies in middle school. She spotted me and marched over, dropping her heavy purse onto the table with a thud that made my tea rattle. "You are early," she said, breathless. "I just got here." I lied. "Do you want a coffee?" "My treat." "No, I am already jittery." She sat down, unbuttoning her coat but not taking it off. She looked at me, her eyes darting around my face as if searching for something. "You look rested." "I slept okay," I said carefully. "How are the kids?" Megan let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "The kids are fine. Ethan needs braces. The dentist told us yesterday. $6,000. Chloe has outgrown all her shoes again. It never ends. Lillian, it just never ends." I nodded sympathetically. "That sounds stressful." "Stressful?" Megan leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. "Stressful is wondering if the car is going to start in the morning. Stressful is choosing between paying the electric bill or the credit card minimum. You do not know what stress is. You live in your quiet little bubble with your spreadsheets." I stiffened. "I have stress." "Megan, work is demanding." "Work," she scoffed. "You sit in a chair and tell people what to do. Try wrangling 2 screaming toddlers while worrying about a mortgage payment that is 3 days late." She took a breath, seemingly trying to calm herself. She reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a crumpled envelope with numbers scrawled on the back. "Look, I did not come here to fight," she said, her voice softening into something more pleading. "I came here because we are family, and families help each other." I gripped my hands together under the table. "What do you mean?" "Megan?" She smoothed the envelope out on the table. "I made a list. These are the things that are drowning us right now. The car transmission is slipping. That is $2,000. The medical bills from Jason's urgent care visit last month are still sitting there. The credit cards are at the limit because of groceries and gas. And now the braces." She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet. "Any decent aunt would want to help her niece and nephew have a good life, right? You adore them." "I know you do. I do love them." I said. "You know I do." "Exactly," Megan said. She sat back, looking almost triumphant. "So, I figured it out. $40,000 is a lot of money. It is a life-changing amount. It is," I agreed. "So, here is what is fair," she said, her tone shifting from pleading to factual. "You keep half. That is $20,000 just for you to play with. You can go to Europe. You can buy a new wardrobe. Whatever you do. And you give us the other half. $20,000 would wipe out our debt and pay for the braces. It would give us a fresh start." I felt the blood drain from my face. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. waiting for her to say she was joking. But her face was deadly serious. She was looking at me with an expectation that was terrifying in its certainty. "Half?" I whispered. "Megan, you want $20,000? I don't want it." "Lillian," she said, sounding annoyed that I wasn't immediately agreeing. "We need it. And you don't? That is the point. You have no dependents. You have a steady job with promotions. You will always land on your feet. You always do." I tried to process the logic. It was a warped, funhouse mirror version of fairness. "Megan," I said, keeping my voice low, "I have $60,000 in student loans. That money is not for playing. It is not for Europe. It is to pay off debt so I can breathe." "But that is good debt," she argued, waving her hand dismissively. "Student loans are low interest. You can pay those off over 20 years. We have high-interest credit card debt. It is eating us alive. It makes more sense for the family if you pay off our bad debt first." "For the family," I repeated, "but it is my bonus. I worked 60-hour weeks for 6 months for this. I missed holidays. I missed sleep. And I work 24 hours a day," she snapped, her voice rising. "Do you think staying home is a vacation? Do you think raising your family's next generation is easy?" "I am not saying it is easy," I said, "but this is my income. I need to build an emergency fund. I need to save for a home. I am 32 and I'm still renting a drafty apartment." Megan rolled her eyes. "Oh, boo-hoo. You rent a nice apartment. We are trying to keep a house from falling apart." She leaned in across the table, invading my personal space. "Look, Lillian, I have kids. You don't. That is the reality. You made your choices. You chose the career and the freedom. I chose the family. But that means when one of us gets a windfall, it should balance things out." I felt a spark of anger ignite in my chest. It was small, but it was hot. I did not choose to be in debt. I said, "And I'm not punishing you for having kids. But you cannot tax my success to pay for your choices." "Tax your success?" Megan repeated, her voice dripping with venom. "Is that what you think this is? I am asking for help. I am begging you to help your sister. And you are acting like a banker." I took a deep breath. I wanted to de-escalate. I wanted to find a middle ground. I reverted to the plan I had rehearsed. "Megan, I cannot give you $20,000. I just cannot. It would ruin my financial plan." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "But," I continued, "I want to help with the car. I know you need the car for the kids. I can give you $2,000. I can write you a check right now. It is a gift. You do not have to pay it back." I waited. $2,000 was a lot of money to me. It was 2 months of rent. It was a significant sacrifice. Megan stared at me. Her expression didn't soften. It hardened. Her lip curled up in a sneer. $2,000? She said flatly. "It is enough to fix the transmission." I said, "You are sitting on $40,000, and you offer me $2,000? She let out a sharp, incredulous breath. "That is 5%. You are offering me 5%. It is $2,000, I whispered furiously. "That is not nothing. It is an insult," she said, her voice getting louder. Heads at nearby tables turned toward us. "You are treating me like a charity case. Here, have some crumbs from my table. I am treating you like a sister who I am trying to help within my means." "Your means?" She laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "You have no means constraints. You are hoarding money because you are selfish. You have always been selfish." "Megan, please," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "People are staring. Let them stare," she said. "Maybe they should know that my sister cares more about her bank balance than her own flesh and blood." She stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. I looked up at her, feeling small and trapped. "I know why you are doing this," she said, pointing a finger at me. "You are jealous. You have always been jealous of the kids. You look at them and you see burdens. You see noise and mess. That is not true," I protested. "It is true," she shouted. "Every time I ask you to babysit, I see that look in your face, that hesitation. You think you are too good for it. You think you are doing us a massive favor just by spending time with your niece and nephew. You are secretly resentful that you are not the center of attention anymore. I felt tears prick my eyes. That was a lie. A twisted, cruel lie. I hesitated to babysit because I was exhausted from working the job that paid for the gifts I bought them. I am done, Megan said. She grabbed her purse. Keep your money. Lillian. Keep all of it. Build a castle with it. But don't you dare come crying to us when you are old and alone because you pushed everyone away. She turned and stormed out of the shop. The silence she left behind was deafening. I sat there, frozen. I could feel the gaze of the other customers on me. A woman 2 tables away was whispering to her husband, looking right at me with an expression of pity. Or was it judgment? I felt like I was naked. I felt like I had been slapped. I stood up on shaky legs, left a $5 bill on the table for the tea I hadn't touched, and walked out to my car. My hands were trembling so badly I dropped my keys in the parking lot. I drove home in a daze. I kept hearing her voice. You have always been selfish. You will end up alone. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the sofa in the dark, clutching a throw pillow to my chest. I felt like I had done something wrong, even though the logical part of my brain, the part that managed million-dollar projects, knew I was right. But family overrides logic. Family installs the buttons that they later push. My phone buzzed in my pocket, then again, a rapid-fire sequence of vibrations. I knew what it was. I didn't want to look, but the pull was irresistible. I pulled out the phone. The screen was bright in the dark room. The Stewart clan group chat. Megan had posted a long block of text. Megan. Just left a meeting with Lillian. I am literally shaking. I went to her, hat in hand, explaining how desperate we are with the medical bills and the kids' needs. I asked for help. Not even half. Just enough to get us to safety. And she laughed. I gasped aloud in the empty room. Laughed? Megan. She literally sat there and laughed and said she needed the money for investment opportunities. She offered me pennies, like I was a beggar on the street, and told me I should have thought about money before having kids. I have never felt so humiliated in my life. She cares more about her spreadsheet than she does about Ethan and Chloe. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. It was a fabrication, a complete distortion. I started to type, "That is not what happened. I offered $2,000, but before I could hit send, my father's message popped up. Robert, Lillian, I am stunned. We raised you to value family above everything. To hear that you would mock your sister when she is down? That is not the daughter I know." Then my mother, Diane. "Oh, Lillian, how could you? Those are your niece and nephew. Blessings are meant to be shared, not hoarded. God gives us success so we can lift up our loved ones. Please tell me Megan is misunderstanding you." Megan. There was no misunderstanding. Mom, she was cold. She looked at me like I was garbage. I threw the phone onto the cushion beside me as if it were burning hot. I couldn't breathe. They were rewriting reality in real time. They were building a story where I was the villain, and they were reinforcing it with every text. I paced the small living room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive over there and shake them, but I knew it wouldn't work. If I argued, I was being defensive. If I stayed silent, I was admitting guilt. The phone buzzed again. A private message this time. From Diane. Diane. Your father is very upset, but I'm just heartbroken. I remember when you and Megan were little. You promised to always take care of each other. You are breaking that promise. Lillian, you are breaking my heart. Please, just fix this. Give her what she needs so we can be a family again. Then a message from Robert. Robert, real success is when the whole family rises. Lillian, if you climb the ladder and kick it down behind you, that is not success. That is a moral failing. Do the right thing. A moral failing. I sank to the floor, leaning my back against the sofa. I felt small. I felt like the child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. The conditioning was deep. Give them what they want, and they will love you. Deny them, and you are bad. I needed an anchor. I needed someone who wasn't part of the Stewart distortion field. I picked up my phone and scrolled past the family chat, past the guilt. To the contacts list, I tapped on Naomi Kim. Naomi answered on the third ring. Her voice was raspy. She had probably been asleep or close to it. Hello? Naomi, I said. My voice cracked. Lillian? Naomi's tone shifted instantly from sleepy to alert. What is wrong? Are you okay? I don't know. I stammered. I think I'm going crazy. Talk to me, she said. I told her everything. I poured it out. The coffee shop meeting. Megan's demand for $20,000. The way she twisted my offer of $2,000 into an insult. The lies in the group chat. My parents calling me a moral failure. I read her the texts verbatim. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the line. For a moment, I feared she would agree with them. I feared she would say, well, $20,000 is a lot. But family is family. Finally, Naomi spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it had a steel edge to it. Lillian, she said, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Okay, I sniffed, wiping my wet face with my sleeve. Imagine I came to you tomorrow. Naomi said, imagine I sat down in your office. We are friends, right? We have worked together for 5 years. Right, I said. Imagine I told you I had credit card debt and car trouble, and then I demanded that you give me $20,000 of your bonus. Not asked, demanded. And when you offered me $2,000, which is an incredibly generous gift, by the way, I screamed at you, called you selfish, and told the whole office you hated me. I stayed silent, picturing it, the absurdity of it, if a stranger, or even a friend, did that to you. Naomi asked, what would you say? I would call the police. I said, or HR. I would think you were having a mental breakdown. Exactly, Naomi said. You would think it was insanity. You would see it for what it is, robbery and manipulation. But this is my sister, I whispered. That just makes it worse. Lillian, Naomi said, because she knows exactly where to hit you. She knows the buttons to push to make you hand over your wallet. She paused, letting the words sink in. They are not acting like family. Lillian, they are acting like sharks who smell blood in the water. That money represents your safety. It represents your future. And they are trying to strip mine it because they think they own you. I looked at the window, at the reflection of my own face in the glass. I looked tired, but I also looked angry. Naomi was right. The fog of guilt was lifting, replaced by the sharp, clear edges of reality. What do I do? I asked. You hold the line, Naomi said. You do not explain. You do not justify. You do not engage with the lies. You say no, and you keep saying no, and you protect that money like your life depends on it. Because honestly, it does. I took a deep breath. The air in the apartment felt a little less suffocating. Thank you. Naomi, I said. Anytime, she replied. Get some sleep. You're going to need your strength. I hung up. I didn't reply to the group chat. I didn't reply to my mother or my father. I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb. I walked into the kitchen and opened my laptop. I brought up my banking portal. The pending transaction was still there. Northbridge Analytics payroll. $40,000. I stared at the number. It wasn't just digits anymore. It was a boundary line. It was the wall between the person I had been, the pleaser, the doormat, the endless resource, and the person I needed to become. I closed the laptop. The war was not over. In fact, I knew Megan well enough to know that the silence from my end would only make them escalate. But for tonight, the bank was closed. I went to bed, and for the first time in a week, I didn't dream about falling. I dreamed about a door with a heavy lock, and I was the one holding the key. The notification arrived on Wednesday morning, a sterile ping that cut through the silence of my open-plan office. I saw Megan's name in the subject line, and my stomach immediately clenched. a Pavlovian response I was beginning to resent. The subject line read, Proposal for Family Financial Stabilization/Lillian Bonus Allocation. I stared at the words, blinking. It sounded like a work memo, something I would receive from a vendor or a junior analyst, not a demand from my sister who had screamed at me in a coffee shop 48 hours prior. I opened the email. Attached was a spreadsheet, an actual, formatted Excel file. Lillian. The body of the email began, I was too emotional the other day. I apologize for raising my voice. However, the facts remain the facts. Jason and I sat down and mapped out exactly where the funds would go. I want you to see that this isn't about me buying purses. This is about survival. Please review the attached breakdown. This is a practical plan. If you look at the numbers, you will see that keeping all that money while we are drowning is not just unfair. It is selfish. I know you are a logical person. Be logical now. I opened the attachment. It was titled, The Carter Family Relief Plan. Column A listed the expenses. Column B listed the costs. Column C had a heading that made my breath hitch. Allocation from Lillian, orthodontist, Ethan. $6,000. Credit card 1, emergency medical/groceries. $8,000. Vehicle repairs. Transmission/tires. $2,500. Mortgage arrears. $3,500. The total at the bottom was exactly $20,000. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the hum of the office air conditioning rushing in my ears. It was breathtaking. She had itemized my labor. She had taken the hours I spent sweating over the Sterling project, the missed weekends, the stress-induced insomnia, and she had assigned them to her own debts. It was not a request. It was an invoice. The most disturbing part was the rationality of it. It was clean. It was organized. It was designed to bypass my emotions and appeal to the project manager in me. As if I were approving a budget variance for a client. But under the neat rows and fonts, the message was the same. You exist to service us. I closed the laptop screen, needing a moment of darkness. I thought about Naomi's words. If a stranger did this, if a stranger sent me an invoice for $20,000 to pay for their braces and car repairs, I would file a restraining order. I composed my reply. I wrote it in a Word document first, editing it ruthlessly to remove any apology, any hesitation, any opening for negotiation. Megan, I wrote, I have reviewed your email. I understand that you are under financial pressure, and I sympathize with that. However, my position has not changed. I have my own financial obligations, specifically $60,000 in student debt and no retirement savings, that I must prioritize. I cannot and will not give you $20,000. The offer I made at the coffee shop still stands. I am willing to gift you $2,000 to cover the car repairs. This is a one-time gift. I cannot do more. I hit send. The response was immediate, as if she had been sitting at her keyboard waiting. Wow, I make it easy for you. I show you the math. I show you exactly how you can save this family. And you still choose money. You are choosing a bank balance over your own flesh and blood. Don't bother with the $2,000. I don't want your pity change. We will figure it out ourselves, like we always do. Just remember who you turned your back on. Then, silence. I waited for the next text, the next email, the next call. But there was nothing. The silence was heavier than the shouting. It felt like the drop in pressure before a tornado touches down. By Friday, the war had moved to a new front: social media. I did not follow Megan closely on Facebook. I had unfollowed her feed years ago to avoid the constant barrage of complaints and oversharing, but I checked her page that afternoon. It was a landscape of passive aggression. At 10 in the morning, she had posted a quote against a background of storm clouds. Hard times reveal true colors. Some people forget where they came from the moment they see a little green. At noon, she shared a viral article titled, The Toxic Trait of Greed in Families, with the caption, So true, you think you know someone, but money changes everything. Sad when aunts care more about luxury than love. I felt a hot flush of shame, even though I had done nothing wrong. It was public. She wasn't naming me, but anyone who knew us, our cousins, our old neighbors, the people I went to high school with, would know exactly who she was talking about. Then I checked my mother's page. Diane had posted a photo of me and Megan from when we were children. I was 5, Megan was 8. We were sitting on the porch of our old house, sharing a popsicle. It was a grainy, sepia-toned memory of a simpler time. The caption read, "My beautiful girls. I remember when they used to share everything. 1 popsicle, 2 smiles. Family should always stick together, no matter what, praying for peace and soft hearts." Beneath it, a chorus of comments from my aunts and her church friends. "Amen, Diane. Family is everything. Hope it works out." They were painting a masterpiece, and I was the villain. I was the cold-hearted sister who had forgotten the lessons of the shared popsicle. That evening, the first flying monkey arrived. It was a text from my cousin Sarah, who lived in Ohio and whom I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. "Hey Lillian, long time no talk. I saw your mom's post. Heard things are tense with you and Meg? I heard there was some misunderstanding about you helping with the kids. Hope you guys are okay. She sounds really stressed." I stared at the screen. Misunderstanding about helping with the kids. That was the narrative. Not Lillian refused to hand over half her annual bonus, but Lillian refused to help the children. I typed back a generic response. "Hey Sarah, just a private financial disagreement. We are working through it." I put the phone down. I felt isolated, surrounded by a fog of half-truths. I wanted to post my own status. I wanted to upload a screenshot of the spreadsheet and say, look at what she is asking." But I knew that would only drag me down into the mud. You cannot win a mud wrestling match with a pig. You both get dirty. And the pig likes it. I needed to act. I needed to make the money untouchable before I cracked. I sat at my kitchen table on Saturday morning. The sun was streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I opened my banking app. The balance was there. $42,150, the bonus, plus my meager checking account balance. My hands were shaking. I wasn't shaking from fear, exactly, but from the enormity of what I was about to do. I was about to spend more money in 5 minutes than I had spent in the last 5 years combined. I clicked on the Transfers tab. First, the student loans. I typed in the number, $20,000. I looked at it. That was half the bonus. That was the amount Megan wanted. If I clicked submit, it was gone. It couldn't be given to her. It couldn't be guilted out of me. It would be swallowed by the federal government, lowering my principal and buying my freedom. I held my breath and clicked submit payment. Processing. Success. I let out a long, ragged exhale. The number on the screen dropped. Next, the car. I owed $3,000 on the sedan. I typed it in. $3,000. Submit. Success. Finally, I opened a new high-yield savings account I had set up the day before. I named it Fortress. I transferred the remainder of the bonus, minus a small buffer for my checking account. $12,000. Submit. Success. It was done. In under 3 minutes, I had deployed the capital. I was debt-free on the car. My student loans were cut in half. I had a fully funded emergency fund for the first time in my life. I sat back and waited to feel happy. I waited for the rush of joy. Instead, I felt a complex cocktail of relief and nausea. I felt lighter, as if a physical weight had been cut from my ankles, but I also felt a deep, gnawing guilt. The conditioning of my childhood was screaming that I was selfish, that I had just burned resources that belonged to the tribe. "It is my money," I said aloud to the empty room. "It is my life." 2 days later, the invitation came. It was a group text, sent to me, our parents, and Jason's parents. Megan. Ethan's 7th birthday party. Saturday at 2 p.m. BBQ and cake. No gifts necessary. But you know Ethan loves Legos. We are putting the drama aside to celebrate our big boy. Hope everyone can come. I stared at the message. Putting the drama aside, it was a truce, or a trap. I debated not going. I could say I was sick. I could say I had to work. But if I didn't go, I confirmed everything they were saying about me. If I didn't go, I was the aunt who didn't care. I was the aunt who abandoned her nephew because she was too busy counting her gold. And I loved Ethan. He was a sweet, sensitive kid who loved dinosaurs and space. He wasn't part of this. He didn't know his mother was using his dental work as a bargaining chip. I typed, "I'll be there. Can't wait to celebrate him." "Great. See you then. See you?" The tone was icy, stripped of emojis or exclamation points. But I was going. I spent Friday night shopping. I bought Ethan a Lego set, the Space Shuttle Explorer. It cost $50. It was a nice gift. It wasn't the PlayStation Megan probably wanted me to buy, nor was it a cheap token. It was thoughtful. On Saturday, I drove to Megan and Jason's house. It was a cookie-cutter colonial in a subdivision where all the houses were painted shades of beige. As I pulled up, I saw the driveway was full. There were streamers on the mailbox. I could smell charcoal smoke and hear the high-pitched shrieks of children running in the backyard. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. I looked pale. I pinched my cheeks to add some color, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. "You are just an aunt at a birthday party," I told myself. Smile, eat cake, leave. I walked through the open front gate into the backyard. There were about 20 people there. My parents were sitting in lawn chairs near the cooler. Jason was manning the grill, engulfed in a cloud of smoke. Megan was organizing a game of pin the tail on the donkey with a group of 7-year-olds. When I walked in, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't dramatic. The music didn't stop, but I felt heads turn. My mother looked up, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she plastered it back on. "Lillian, you made it," Diane called out, a little too loudly. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." I walked over and kissed them both on the cheek. My father patted my arm, but he didn't make eye contact. He looked at his beer can as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Megan saw me. She handed the blindfold to another mom and walked over. She was wearing a sundress and a strained smile. "Hi, Lillian," she said. "Hi, Megan. Happy birthday to Ethan." I held up the gift bag. "Thanks," she said. "You can put it on the table with the others." She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was. She pointed to a folding table piled high with brightly colored boxes. I placed my gift on the pile. I felt eyes boring into my back. I turned and saw Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, watching me while sipping iced tea. She gave me a tight nod. I nodded back. I felt like a foreign pathogen that had entered a sterile environment. I made the rounds. I said hello to Jason, who looked more tired than usual. "Hey, Lillian," he said, flipping a burger. "Thanks for coming." "Of course. Jason, I wouldn't miss it." He looked at me, and for a second, I saw something like apology in his eyes. "Look, about the email. Megan is she is really stressed. I know. Jason, let's not talk about it today. Today is for Ethan." He nodded, looking relieved. "Yeah, right. I found Ethan running near the swing set. I crouched down and gave him a high five. Happy birthday, buddy, Aunt Lillian." He threw his sticky arms around my neck. "Did you bring me a present?" I did. "It is on the table." "But you have to wait to open it." "You are the best," he yelled, and then ran off to chase a dog. My heart squeezed. He didn't care about my bonus. He just wanted to know I was there. For an hour. I managed. I made small talk about the weather. I ate a hot dog. I avoided being alone with Megan or my parents. I was surviving. Then came the cake. Megan gathered everyone around the picnic table. She lit the 7 candles. We all sang Happy Birthday, the off-key chorus rising into the summer air. Ethan blew out the candles, spitting a little on the frosting, and everyone cheered. As Megan began slicing the cake, a woman I didn't know well, a neighbor named Brenda, leaned over to me. She was holding a paper plate and smiling. "I heard congratulations are in order," Brenda said cheerfully. "Megan mentioned you got a huge promotion at work. That is fantastic." The noise in the backyard seemed to drop away. Megan froze, the knife hovering over a slice of chocolate cake. "Oh, thank you," I said. trying to keep my voice low. It was a nice surprise. Must be quite the job, Brenda continued, oblivious to the tension she was stroking. Megan said something about a massive bonus? Must be nice to have that kind of freedom. I keep telling my husband I need a bonus like that just to pay for groceries these days. She laughed. It was an innocent, friendly laugh. But it was the spark that lit the fuse. Megan slammed the knife down onto the table. It clattered against the metal, a sharp, violent sound that silenced the yard. Freedom, Megan repeated. She didn't look at Brenda. She looked straight at me. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with a mixture of rage and Chardonnay. Megan. Jason started, taking a step toward her. Yes, it must be nice, Megan said, her voice rising to a shout. It must be nice to have so much freedom that you can watch your family drown and just sit there counting your gold. Megan, stop, I said, my voice trembling. Not here. Why not here? She demanded. She gestured around the yard with a frosting-covered hand. Everyone here is family or friends. Why shouldn't they know? Why shouldn't they know that Aunt Lillian is sitting on a $40,000 windfall and refused to help her own nephew get braces? A collective gasp went through the crowd. I saw Aunt Linda's mouth drop open. My mother covered her face with her hands. That is not true, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Though my heart was hammering against my ribs, I offered to help. You offered crumbs, Megan screamed. She grabbed a stack of paper plates and swiped them off the table. They fluttered to the grass like giant confetti. You offered me pocket change. You looked me in the eye and told me my kids weren't worth your precious investment strategy. I did not say that, I shouted back, losing my composure. I said I have to pay my own debts. You have no debts that matter. You have no one. You are selfish. Lillian. You have always been selfish. Megan, please. Jason grabbed her arm, but she shook him off. She stepped toward me, her face contorted. Do you know what I did with the money Mom and Dad gave me? I bought this house. I built a family. What are you going to do? Buy a condo so you can die alone in it? The cruelty of the words took my breath away. It was a low blow, aimed directly at my deepest insecurity. You don't care if my kids have food, Megan hissed. You don't care if they have straight teeth. You only care about yourself. Well, fine. If you love your money so much, you can marry it, but don't expect to be part of this family. She pointed a shaking finger at the gate. Get out, Megan, my father said. Standing up. Get out, she screamed at me. If you won't step up when we need you, then you are dead to us. You are dead to me. I looked around the yard. 20 people were staring at me. Some looked horrified. Some looked gleeful at the drama. But no one moved. No one defended me. My parents stood there, paralyzed by their own permissiveness. Jason looked at his shoes. I felt a coldness settle over me. It was the shock. I knew, protecting me from the pain that would come later. Goodbye, Ethan, I whispered, though he was hiding behind Jason's legs and couldn't hear me. I turned and walked to the gate. I held my head high. I did not run. I walked past the balloon arch, past the cooler, past the judgment. I walked out to my car. My keys clutched so tightly in my hand that the metal bit into my palm. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The silence of the car was a sanctuary. I started the engine, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I needed to get away. I needed to be anywhere but here. I drove 3 blocks and pulled into a pharmacy parking lot. I couldn't drive like this. I was hyperventilating. I put the car in park and leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, gasping for air. Dead to us. The words echoed in the small cabin. She had said it. She had nuked the bridge. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I flinched. I didn't want to look. I expected it to be Megan, continuing the tirade, or my mother, begging me to come back and apologize. I picked up the phone. It wasn't a contact I had saved. It was a local number. I opened the message. Ms. Stewart, this is HR at Northbridge Analytics. We need to speak with you immediately on Monday morning regarding some concerning allegations related to your behavior and potential conflicts of interest. Please check your work email for a meeting invite. My stomach dropped. It felt like the floor of the car had fallen out. Allegations. Behavior. I stared at the screen, the text blurring through my tears. The war wasn't just in the backyard anymore. It had breached the perimeter. Megan hadn't just nuked the bridge. She had called in an airstrike on my livelihood. Monday morning at Northbridge Analytics usually smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. That day, it smelled like impending doom. I arrived at my desk at 8 o'clock. Keeping my head down, I had spent the weekend in a state of paralysis, staring at the walls of my apartment, replaying the scene at the birthday party until the memory felt like a bruised rib. Dead to us. The words had a weight that physical blows lacked. I tried to focus on my inbox. I had 3 status reports to review and a budget reconciliation for the Henderson account. I opened the first spreadsheet, but the numbers swam before my eyes. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. At 9:30, the summons came. It wasn't an email this time. It was Carla Ruiz, standing at the entrance to my cubicle. She didn't have her usual morning smile. She looked grave. "Lillian," she said, her voice low. "Can you come with me? We need to have a quick chat in conference room B." My heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of wood. I grabbed my notebook, a reflex more than a necessity, and followed her. Conference room B was a small, glass-walled fishbowl near the elevators. Inside, a woman I didn't know was sitting at the table. She was wearing a gray blazer and had a laptop open in front of her. "Lillian, this is Sarah Jenkins from Human Resources," Carla said, closing the door behind us. "Please, sit down." I sat. The chair felt cold. "Ms. Stewart," Sarah began, her tone neutral but firm. "We have received a communication this morning that raises some concerns regarding your conduct. Northbridge takes the well-being of its employees and the reputation of the firm very seriously." My mouth was dry. "A communication?" "Yes." Sarah said, "We received a call and a follow-up email from a member of your family. They allege that you have been exhibiting signs of severe emotional instability. They also claim that you have been aggressively harassing family members for money and that you might be in a financial crisis that could compromise your judgment with client accounts." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from sliding off the chair. It was a masterpiece of projection. Megan had taken her own behavior, inverted it, and pinned it on me. That is completely false." I stammered. Sarah typed something into her laptop. "The allegations are quite specific. Ms. Stewart, they claim you caused a scene at a child's birthday party this weekend, shouting at relatives about money. They expressed concern that you might be, and I quote, having a breakdown that makes you unfit for responsibility." I felt a flush of heat rise from my neck to my hairline. It was humiliating. To have my personal life, my family's dysfunction, dragged into this clean professional space was a violation I hadn't prepared for. I looked at Carla. She was watching me, her brow furrowed. She didn't look angry. She looked confused. She knew me. She knew I was the person who color-coded my filing system. She knew I was the person who stayed late to fix other people's mistakes. "Carla," I said, turning to her, "you know me. You know my work." "I do," Carla said. "That is why we are having this meeting. Lillian, instead of something more severe. But we have to address this. If a client hears that a project manager is unstable or desperate for money, it is a liability." I took a deep breath. I needed to be the project manager now. I needed to manage this disaster. "I am not unstable," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "And I am not in financial crisis. The reality is the opposite, as you know. I just received a significant bonus." Carla nodded. "My sister, Megan Carter, is currently experiencing financial difficulties." I continued, choosing my words with surgical precision. "She asked me for a large sum of money, half of my bonus. When I declined, she became very upset. The incident at the party was her shouting at me because I refused to give her $20,000. I left the party to de-escalate the situation." Sarah stopped typing. She looked up, her expression shifting from suspicion to curiosity. So you are saying this complaint is retaliation? It is. I said, it is a family dispute that she has unfortunately chosen to bring into my workplace. I apologize that you have to deal with this, but I assure you, my finances are stable, my mental health is fine, and I have never harassed anyone. I paused, then added, I can provide bank statements showing my solvency if necessary. Carla leaned back in her chair and let out a long sigh. She looked at the HR rep. Sarah, Lillian has been with us for 5 years. She is the most level-headed person on my team. This screams of a domestic dispute spilling over. Sarah nodded slowly. We see this sometimes during divorces, she said, her tone softening. Spouses trying to sabotage each other. It is rare between siblings, but not unheard of. She closed her laptop. Look, Ms. Stewart, as long as there is no police report and no evidence of you misbehaving at work, we are not going to take action based on a phone call. However, we need you to document this. Send me a brief email summarizing what you just told us. We will keep it on file in case they contact us again. And Lillian? Carla added, if she calls here again, or shows up, security will handle it. You are safe here. Thank you, I whispered. I felt like I might cry, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of being believed. I walked back to my desk on trembling legs. I felt battered. Megan had tried to kill my career. She had tried to take away the one place where I had agency and respect. It wasn't just a tantrum anymore. It was war. At lunch, I went to my car to call Naomi. I couldn't breathe in the building. I told her everything. The meeting, the lies, the sheer malice of it. Naomi listened, and I could hear her tapping on a keyboard in the background. I knew it. She muttered, I knew she didn't come up with that HR strategy on her own. Megan is not that smart. What do you mean? I asked. Check your messages. Naomi said, I just sent you a screenshot. I pulled the phone away from my ear and opened the image. It was a screenshot of a Facebook status Megan had posted late Sunday night. Restricted so only friends could see it, which explained why I hadn't seen it. But Naomi's friend, who was a cousin of a cousin, had. The post read, Sometimes you have to take hard steps to protect your family from abusers, even if they are blood. Mental instability is real, and it is dangerous. Don't let toxic people hide behind a professional mask. Below it, a comment from a woman named Karen Miller. So brave of you to speak up. Hun, I know people at Northbridge. I made sure the right ears heard about the risk. You are doing the right thing protecting those kids. I stared at the name, Karen Miller. I vaguely remembered her from Megan's wedding photos. She was a bridesmaid. She worked in recruiting for a local healthcare chain. She weaponized her network. I said, my voice cold. She got her friend to call in a hit. It is classic Darvo, Naomi said. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. She is painting you as the abuser so she can feel like the righteous victim. Lillian, you have to lock this down. I hung up the phone. My hands were no longer shaking. They were clenched into fists. I dialed my parents' house. I didn't care that it was the middle of the workday. I needed to hear them say it. I needed to hear them condemn this. Surely, trying to get me fired was a line even they wouldn't cross. Diane answered on the 4th ring. Hello? Mom, it is Lillian. There was a pause, a heavy, guilty silence. Lillian, we didn't expect to hear from you. Did you know? I asked. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Know what? Diane's voice was high, tight. Did you know Megan tried to get me fired today? Did you know she had her friend call HR at Northbridge and tell them I was mentally unstable? Diane gasped. Oh, no, she didn't. She did. Mom, I was pulled into a meeting. I almost lost my job, my livelihood. There was a muffled sound, like a hand over the receiver, and I heard her whisper something to my father. Then she came back on the line. Lillian, honey, that is terrible. We knew she was angry. She was ranting yesterday about how you needed to be taught a lesson. but we didn't think she would actually do something like that. So you admit she is out of control? I asked. You admit this has to stop? Well, Diane hesitated. She did go too far. I will talk to her. I will tell her that work is off limits. But I heard the word hanging in the air. But Lillian, you have to understand, Diane said, her voice shifting into that wheedling, pleading tone I hated. She is desperate. People do crazy things when they are backed into a corner. If you would just help her out, even a little bit more, this would all go away. I froze. I stood in the parking lot, the sun beating down on my black slacks, and felt a chill go through my marrow. What did you say? I whispered. Just give her what she needs, Diane said. Not the whole 20,000, maybe 10. Just to calm her down. Think of it as buying peace. Is your job worth more than your family's peace? Buying peace, it wasn't a request for help. It was a ransom demand. And my mother was the negotiator for the terrorist. You want me to pay her off, I said flatly, after she tried to destroy my career. You want me to reward her? I want us to be a family again, Diane cried. I want Sunday dinners. I want my girls to love each other. And you are the one with the power to fix it, Lillian. You are the one with the money. Just be the bigger person. Please. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I just ended the call. I couldn't go back to work. I emailed Carla from my phone, telling her I wasn't feeling well and would finish my hours from home. I drove to my apartment, but I didn't go inside. I went to the storage unit in the basement of my building. I needed to understand. I needed to know why. Why was I always the one who had to pay? Why was Megan's comfort always worth more than my safety? I unlocked my small wire cage and found the plastic tote bin labeled Grandpa Henry, papers. My grandfather had passed away 5 years ago. He was the only person in the family who made sense to me. He was a quiet man, a carpenter who saved every penny. When he died, he left a small estate. I remembered the reading of the will. Everything went to my parents. I had assumed that was the end of it, but I remembered something else. I remembered him telling me, when I was 16, that he was putting money away for his girls. I dragged the box into the hallway, sitting on the concrete floor under the flickering fluorescent bulb. I opened the lid. It smelled of old newsprint and cedar. I sifted through the tax returns, the deeds, the receipts for lumber, and then I found it, a manila envelope labeled College Funds. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were statements from a local credit union. There were 2 accounts listed. Account A, Lillian Stewart. Account B, Megan Stewart. I looked at the dates. The statements went back 15 years. In 2005, when Megan started college, her account had $12,000 in it. The statements showed regular withdrawals for tuition and books over the next 4 years, draining the account to zero. I turned to my stack. In 2008, when I graduated high school, my account had $14,000. Grandpa had added more to mine because I was younger. $14,000. That would have covered my first 2 years of state university. That would have meant I didn't have to take out the private loans with the predatory interest rates, the loans I was still paying off. I looked at the withdrawals on my account. August 15th, 2009. Withdrawal, $14,200. Closing balance, 0. I stared at the date. August 2009. I was a sophomore in college. I remembered that summer. I remembered calling my parents, crying because my financial aid package had been cut, and asking if they could help. They had told me money was tight. They had told me to take out another loan. It builds character, my father had said. But where did the money go? August 2009. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. August 2009 was when Megan and Jason bought their first house. The starter home they had bragged about. They had miraculously come up with a down payment despite working entry-level jobs. I dug deeper into the envelope. I found a carbon copy of a letter, written in my mother's handwriting, addressed to the credit union. To bank manager, please close the account for Lillian Stewart and issue a cashier's check made out to Megan Carter. Reason? Family Emergency/Home Purchase Assistance. Signed, Diane Stewart, Custodian. I sat on the cold concrete floor, clutching the piece of paper. It wasn't an emergency. It was a down payment. They had stolen my education fund, money my grandfather had specifically set aside for me, and given it to Megan so she wouldn't have to rent. And then, when I needed tuition, they told me to go into debt. They had been robbing me for years. The bonus wasn't the start of the pattern. It was just the first time I had said no. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me, calcifying my heart. I put the papers back in the envelope. I took the envelope with me. I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call first. When I walked in, they were in the kitchen. Diane was cutting vegetables. Robert was reading the paper. They looked up, surprised to see me. "Lillian?" Diane said, wiping her hands. "Did you change your mind? Did you decide to help your sister?" I walked over to the table and slammed the envelope down on the placemat. The sound made Robert jump. "What is this?" he asked. "Open it," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Low, flat, unrecognizable. Diane opened the envelope. She saw the bank statement. She saw her own handwriting on the letter. She went pale. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. "In Grandpa's box." I said, "You stole $14,000 from me." "Lillian, we didn't steal it," Robert said. Standing up, he tried to look authoritative, but his eyes were darting around the room. "We borrowed it. Megan needed a house. She was pregnant with Ethan. We couldn't let them live in that apartment." "You borrowed it?" I laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. "When were you going to pay it back?" "It has been 12 years. I'm still paying interest on loans I shouldn't have needed. We intended to put it back," Diane said, tears forming in her eyes. "But things got tight. The economy crashed. We just forgot." "You forgot," I repeated. "You forgot that you sacrificed my future to buy Megan a house. Just like you want me to sacrifice my security now to pay for her mistakes." "It is not the same," Diane cried. "She is your sister. She needed help." "I needed help," I shouted, finally losing my cool. I was 19. I was working 2 jobs and studying full-time. I called you crying about tuition, and you told me to take out a loan, while you were sitting on $14,000 of my money. "We did what we thought was best for the family," Robert yelled back. "Megan needed us more." "You were always the strong one." "Lillian, you didn't need the help." The words hung in the air. "You were always the strong one." It was the curse of competence. Because I didn't complain. Because I didn't fail. I was invisible. My needs were optional. Megan's needs were mandatory. I looked at them. I looked at the kitchen where I had grown up, the table where we had eaten roast beef every Sunday. I realized I was looking at strangers. These people didn't protect me. They farmed me. I picked up the envelope. "I am leaving." I said, "Lillian, wait." Diane grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. "Don't go like this. We can work this out. We can make a payment plan. Let go of me." I said. She dropped my arm as if I were hot iron. I walked out. I got in my car. I drove away. And I didn't look back. The next morning, I was sitting in a plush armchair in an office that smelled of lavender and old books. Doctor. Hannah Blake sat across from me. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and very sharp glasses. Naomi had recommended her. She specializes in family trauma. Naomi had said, "You need a professional." I told Dr. Blake everything. The bonus, the demand, the HR call, the stolen college fund, the phrase, "buying peace." When I finished, I sat back, exhausted. "Doctor." Blake was silent for a moment. Then she leaned forward. "Lillian," she said gently, "do you know what enmeshment is?" I shook my head. "It is a family dynamic where boundaries are non-existent," she explained. "Individual identities are suppressed to maintain the family unit. In your family, it seems there are assigned roles. Megan is the identified patient, the one with the problems who draws all the attention and resources. You are the stabilizer. Your role is to be low maintenance and to provide resources to the patient. She paused. When you refused to give up your bonus, you didn't just say no to money. You broke the script. You stepped out of your role. That is why they are reacting with such extreme aggression. To them, your independence feels like an attack. So I am not crazy? I asked, my voice small. No. Doctor, Blake said, you are the healthiest person in a sick system, but you cannot heal the system. You can only save yourself. She handed me a notepad. We need to write a boundary, she said, a hard one, and you need to be prepared for them to test it, because they will. That night, I sat at my laptop. My hands were shaking again, but this time, it was with adrenaline. I opened a new email. To Megan Carter, Diane Stewart, Robert Stewart. Subject, cease and desist / future contact. I typed the words, Doctor, Blake and I had drafted, Megan, Mom, Dad. Effective immediately. I am ceasing all financial discussions with you. I will not be providing any portion of my bonus to Megan. The offer of $2,000 is rescinded. Furthermore, I am aware of the false report made to my HR department. This was a malicious attempt to damage my livelihood. If there is any further contact with my employer, or any further harassment of me or my workplace, I will instruct my lawyer to file a civil suit for defamation and tortious interference regarding the $14,000 misappropriated from my college trust. I am currently reviewing my legal options. Do not contact me until you are ready to respect these boundaries. If you come to my home, I will not open the door. Lillian. I hovered the mouse over the send button. I knew what this meant. It wasn't just an email. It was an eviction notice. I was evicting them from my life. I was choosing the condo where I would die alone, over the crowded, suffocating house of their love. I clicked send. I closed the laptop. The room was quiet. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. The email arrived at 2 a.m, a digital scream in the quiet of the night. I saw it when I woke up for work. The subject line written in all caps, regarding your threats. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, and braced myself. Lillian. Megan wrote, I cannot believe you are threatening to sue your own family. Is this what that therapist is telling you? You have been brainwashed. You are paying some stranger to tell you that your family is toxic just so you can feel better about being selfish. Doctor, Blake doesn't know us. She doesn't know how much we have sacrificed for you. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the block of text. It was a manifesto of grievances, a rewriting of history where every birthday gift I had ever received was retroactively a loan, and every family dinner was a transaction. You want to talk about legal action? The email continued. Fine, let's talk about the verbal agreement you made. You promised, Lillian. You sat at our dinner table 1,000 times and said you would pay us back for supporting you when you were just starting out. You said you would take care of the family when you made it big. That is a verbal contract. And in the state of Colorado, verbal contracts are binding. If you don't transfer the $20,000 by Friday, we are filing a claim for breach of contract. We will let a judge decide if you can just walk away from your debts. I stared at the screen. I had never promised to pay them back for raising me. I had said things like, I'm so grateful, or I'd love to treat you guys to dinner when I get a raise. To twist those sentiments into a legally binding debt of $20,000 was madness. A few minutes later, another email popped up. This one was from Diane. She had forwarded Megan's message with a note at the top. Lillian, I read what your sister wrote. I am so sad it has come to this. I don't recognize you anymore. The daughter I raised would never threaten her parents with a lawyer. Please, just do the right thing before this gets ugly. We love you, but we cannot let you abandon your obligations. I closed the laptop. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard stone forming in the center of my chest. They were really doing this. They were going to sue me for my success. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, a process server knocked on my apartment door. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker who handed me a thick envelope. mumbled, "Have a nice day," and walked away. I opened the envelope in my kitchen. It was a summons. Plaintiff: Megan Carter, Robert Stewart, Diane Stewart. Defendant: Lillian Stewart. Court: Small Claims. Court of Brookhaven County. Claim: breach of verbal contract/unpaid family loan repayment. Amount claimed: $7,500. They had filed for the maximum amount allowed in small claims court. In the description, Megan had written, "Defendant agreed to repay family investment in her education and career support. Defendant acknowledged debt verbally on multiple occasions. This claim represents the first installment of the owed balance." I laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound that hurt my throat. They were suing me for $7,500 as a first installment. They were literally trying to garnish my life. The fury that washed over me was different from the hurt I had felt before. This was white hot. It was clarifying. I went to my computer and searched for civil litigation attorneys Brookhaven. I found a man named Samuel Henderson. His website said he specialized in family disputes and contract law. I called his office the next morning and got an appointment for Thursday. Mr. Henderson was a man in his 60s with a messy desk and a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor. He listened as I explained the situation, read the summons, and looked at the emails I had printed out. "This is a nuisance suit," he said, tossing the papers onto his desk. "A verbal contract for $20,000 based on family support? It is nonsense, without a promissory note, a schedule of repayment, or a record of funds changing hands with the expectation of repayment. They have no case." "So I will win?" I asked. "Legally?" "Yes, almost certainly," he said. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "But Lillian, small claims court is not about high-minded legal theory. It is messy. It is you and them in a room with a judge who has 10 minutes to hear your story. It will be emotional. They will lie. They will cry. You need to be prepared for that. I am prepared." I said, "Are you?" He asked gently. "Can you stand in front of a judge and call your mother a liar? Because that is what you will have to do." I thought about the empty bank account in my grandfather's box. I thought about the buying peace comment. "Yes," I said, "I can." As the court date approached, I spent more time with Dr. Blake than I did with my friends. The therapy sessions shifted from processing trauma to what felt like witness preparation. I am afraid I will get angry. I confessed during one session, I am afraid Megan will start shouting lies about me hating the kids, and I will scream back, and the judge will think I am the unstable one. That is exactly what Megan wants. "Doctor," Blake said, "she wants to pull you into the mud. If you react emotionally, you validate her narrative that this is just a family squabble between two dramatic sisters." She had me practice. I sat in the chair. "And Doctor," Blake played the role of Megan. "Lillian promised she would help us." "Doctor," Blake said, mimicking Megan's frantic tone, "she knows we are drowning and she doesn't care." I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the chair. There was no contract. I did not agree to a loan. I offered a gift, which was refused. "Good, Doctor," Blake said. "Keep it boring. Be a gray rock. You are not a daughter defending her love. You are a defendant stating facts. The court does not care who the better daughter is. The court cares about evidence." It became my mantra. Evidence, not emotion. 3 days before the hearing, my phone rang at 10 o'clock at night. I looked at the screen. It was Jason. I hesitated. I had blocked Megan and my parents. But I hadn't blocked Jason. He was the collateral damage in this war, and I had always liked him. I picked up. "Hello? Lillian?" His voice was a whisper. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the background. He must be in the kitchen. "Hi." "Jason," I said, guarding my tone. "I wanted to call you." He stammered. "I heard about the lawsuit. The court date is Monday, right?" "Yes," I said. "Are you calling to tell me to settle?" "Because I won't—" No, he said quickly. "God, no. Lillian, I am so sorry. I am so sorry about the birthday party. I am so sorry about all of this. It is insane." "Then why aren't you stopping it?" I asked. You are her husband." He let out a long, ragged sigh. "You don't understand. She is spiraling. It is not just the braces. Lillian, what do you mean?" Jason lowered his voice even further. "I found statements, credit card statements she was hiding. It is not just the medical bills. She has been spending money we don't have for years. Online shopping, expensive clothes for the kids to keep up appearances, trips. She has $40,000 in credit card debt. Just her cards." I closed my eyes. 40,000. The exact amount of my bonus. It wasn't a coincidence. She saw my bonus as the magic eraser for her secret disaster. "She is terrified I will leave her if I find out the total," Jason whispered. "She thinks if she can get the money from you, she can fix it before the house of cards falls down. That is why she is so aggressive. She is fighting for her life." I gripped the phone. "Jason, you have to tell the truth in court. You have to tell the judge this isn't a loan I owe. It is her debt." "I can't," he said, his voice breaking. "Lillian, please, if I humiliate her in court, if I reveal all that, it will destroy us. The kids will see their mom broken. We might get divorced. I am just trying to keep the family together for Ethan and Chloe." "So you want me to pay for her lies?" I asked, my voice rising. "You want me to give her $20,000 so she can hide her spending addiction from you?" "No, I don't expect you to pay," he said. "I am just asking you not to bring up the credit cards in court. Please, just beat the case on the merits. Don't expose her secrets. Don't destroy her in front of Mom and Dad." I listened to his breathing. He was a good man, but he was a weak one. He was asking me to fight with one hand tied behind my back to protect the woman who was trying to stab me. "I will think about it." "Jason," I said. I hung up. I sat in the dark. Torn. I had the ammunition to nuke her. If I walked into court and said, "My sister is suing me because she has $40,000 in secret credit card debt," the case would be over. Her credibility would be incinerated. But I thought about Ethan. I thought about Chloe. Did I want to be the reason their parents divorced? Did I want to be the one who revealed that their mother was a liar? I decided then I would win. But I would win with my own truth. I didn't need to expose Megan's shame to prove my innocence. My bank records and the stolen college fund were enough. 2 days later, my mother called. She left a voicemail, her voice trembling. "Lillian, please, we don't want to go to court. We want to settle this as a family. Pastor Mike has agreed to mediate a meeting at the church tomorrow night. Just come. Just talk to us. If we can't agree, we can still go to court on Monday. But please, give us one chance to fix this with God." I played the message for Dr. Blake. "What do you think?" I asked. "It is a trap," she said bluntly. "They want to get you into a room where the laws of evidence don't apply. Only the laws of guilt." "I know." I said. "But, doctor," Blake continued, "it might be the closure you need. If you go, do not go to negotiate. Go to deliver your final statement. Go to see them clearly." So I went. The community center of the First Methodist Church smelled exactly as I remembered. Floor wax, stale coffee, and old hymnals. I walked into the small meeting room at 7 o'clock. My parents and Megan were already there, sitting in a semicircle of metal folding chairs. Megan looked haggard, her eyes were puffy, and she was wearing a modest cardigan, dressed for the role of the suffering mother. Diane and Robert looked anxious. In the center sat Pastor Mike, a man I had known since Sunday school. He was kind, soft-spoken, and completely out of his depth. "Lillian, thank you for coming," Pastor Mike said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Please, sit. We are here to find a path to peace." I sat. I didn't take off my coat. I kept my purse on my lap. I was not staying long. "Let us begin with a prayer," Pastor Mike said. He prayed for wisdom, for charity, for the softening of hardened hearts. I kept my eyes open, watching them. Megan had her head bowed low, her shoulders shaking slightly. It was a performance, I realized. Or maybe she really believed she was the victim. That was the scary part. Her delusion was sincere. When the prayer ended, Pastor Mike looked at us. "Megan, why don't you start? Tell Lillian what you're feeling. Not demands, Just feelings. Megan took a shaky breath. She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. I feel betrayed, she whispered. She paused to wipe her eyes. I have given up everything for this family. Lillian, I gave up my career to raise the kids. I manage the house. I take care of Mom and Dad when they are sick. I carry the weight of everything. She looked at her hands. And you have always had it easy. You went to college. You got the big job. You travel. And I was happy for you. I really was. But when I came to you for help, when I told you we were drowning, you looked at me like I was a beggar. She looked up, her voice gaining strength. That bonus. It isn't just money. Lillian, it is a blessing. And blessings are meant to be shared. You have no kids. You have no one depending on you. Keeping all of it. It feels like you are saying that my struggle doesn't matter. That my kids don't matter. It is a gift to the family that you are hoarding. Diane sniffled loudly. Robert reached over and patted Megan's hand. Pastor Mike nodded sympathetically. Thank you. Megan, Lillian, can you respond to that? Can you explain why you feel you cannot help your sister? The room went silent. They were all looking at me. The pastor with expectation, my parents with hope, Megan with a challenge. They expected me to defend my greed. They expected me to say, I need a new car. I stood up. I walked over to the small table in the corner and poured myself a glass of water, taking my time. Then I turned back to them. I didn't speak to Megan. I spoke to the room. I am not hoarding a gift, I said, my voice steady and low. I am managing my wages. I looked at Diane. You talk about family support. You talk about how we all help each other. But that has never been true. The support in this family flows in one direction. From me to Megan, Lillian. That is not fair. Robert started. It is a fact. I cut him off. And I have the receipts. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. The one from Grandpa's box. I have spent the last week going through my finances. I said, I calculated the unpaid loans I gave Megan over the last 10 years, the car repair in 2018, the short-term loan for rent in 2015, the vet bills, it totals $4,000. I never asked for it back. I opened the envelope and pulled out the credit union statement. But that is small change compared to this, I said. I held up the paper. $14,000. I said, that was the money Grandpa left for my education. Money that was in my name. And in August 2009, you, Mom, withdrew every cent of it and gave it to Megan for a down payment on her house. Pastor Mike's eyes went wide. He looked at Diane. Diane went pale, shrinking into her chair. You stole my education to buy her house. I said, and then, when I struggled to pay tuition, you told me to take out loans. You let me go into debt to subsidize her lifestyle. I am not the one who owes this family. I said, my voice hard as diamond. This family owes me. You owe me $14,000 plus interest. You owe me the years of stress I spent paying off loans I shouldn't have had. Megan stood up, her face splotchy with rage. That was different. We needed that house. You were just a student. You didn't need it then. It wasn't yours to take, I shouted back. It was mine. Megan turned to the pastor. See? See how she is? She is keeping score. She is bringing up ancient history to justify letting my kids starve. I am not letting them starve. I said, I offered to fix your car. You threw it in my face because it wasn't enough. You don't want help. Megan, you want a bailout. You want me to fill the hole in your finances that you dug yourself. I looked at Jason. He was sitting in the back, near the door, looking like he wanted to vanish. He met my eyes, and I saw the panic there. Don't tell them. I looked back at Megan. I saw the entitlement burning in her eyes. She really believed she was right. She believed that because she had children, she was the main character of the universe. And I was just an NPC with a wallet. I am done, I said. I am done being the safety net. I am done being the retirement plan. I am done being the successful one who pays for the struggling one. I looked at my parents. You filed a lawsuit against me. I said, you sued your own daughter. You dragged me into small claims court over a fantasy. Do you have any idea what that does to a relationship? We just wanted you to do the right thing, Robert shouted, his face red. No, I said, you wanted me to do the obedient thing. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The air was thick with the dust of old secrets. Pastor Mike cleared his throat. He looked shaken. He looked from the weeping mother to the angry sister to the defiant daughter. He looked at the bank statement on the table. He turned to Diane and Robert. Brother, sister, he said gently, I have a question for you. They looked up. At what point? Pastor Mike asked. Does Lillian get to have her own life? Diane blinked. What? At what point? He repeated, his voice firm. Does she get to keep what she earns? At what point does she stop owing her sister for the crime of being successful? Diane opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Robert. Robert looked at the floor, his jaw working, unable to meet the pastor's eyes. Because, Pastor Mike continued, it sounds to me like you have penalized her for being responsible. And now you are asking the church and the law to enforce that penalty. Diane put her face in her hands and began to sob. It wasn't the polite crying of the beginning of the meeting. It was the ugly, gasping sobbing of someone who has been seen. Megan glared at the pastor. You are supposed to be on our side, she hissed. I am on the side of truth. Megan, he said sadly, and the truth is, coveting your sister's goods is a sin. Megan grabbed her purse. This is bullshit. She spat. She looked at me. I will see you in court, and I will win. Because I have witnesses who heard you promise to help. She stormed out. Jason lingered for a second, gave me a sorrowful look, and followed her. I picked up my papers. I didn't look at my parents. They were broken people, and I couldn't fix them. Thank you, Pastor, I said. I walked out into the cool night air. The meeting hadn't brought peace, but Dr. Blake was right. It had brought closure. I knew exactly who they were now, and on Monday, I would show the judge. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly. I dressed in my best navy suit. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I looked like a project manager. I looked like someone who handled crises for a living. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. The small claims hallway was crowded with people clutching folders. Landlords, tenants, angry neighbors. I sat on a wooden bench, my folder on my lap. Inside were 3 copies of my bank statements, the emails, and the college fund documents. A few minutes later, they arrived. Megan walked in front, wearing a black dress that looked like funeral attire. Diane and Robert trailed behind her, looking small and old. They didn't look at me. They sat on the bench on the opposite wall, staring resolutely at the courtroom doors. Jason wasn't there. I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. The bailiff opened the door. All rise for the Honorable Judge Keller. Judge Keller was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and a face that suggested she had heard every lie ever told. She sat down and adjusted her glasses. Case number 402, Carter et al. Versus Stewart. She read, Parties. Please step forward. I walked to the defendant's table. Megan and my parents stood at the plaintiff's table. Judge Keller looked at the file. She looked at us. Okay, she said, leaning back. This is a claim for $7,500 for breach of a verbal contract regarding family support loan repayment? Yes, Your Honor, Megan said, her voice trembling just the right amount. Judge Keller looked at me. And you deny this contract exists? I do, Your Honor. I said, all right, Judge Keller said. Ms. Carter, it is your claim. Tell me what happened. Megan took a deep breath. She launched into her story. She told the judge about how the family had always pooled resources. She talked about how they had supported me through college. A lie. She said that at Sunday dinners. I had repeatedly promised that once I got my big break, I would pay back the family for their investment so that everyone could rise together. She makes promises. Your Honor, Megan said, wiping a tear. She promised to help with the kids. She promised to help with the house repairs. And we relied on those promises. We made financial decisions based on her word. And now that she has the money, she is laughing at us. Judge Keller listened impassively. She took a few notes. And do you have any text messages, emails, or written documents where Ms. Stewart acknowledges this debt? Judge Keller asked. Megan hesitated. Well, no, Your Honor. It was verbal. It was at the dinner table. Family doesn't write contracts. Judge Keller raised an eyebrow. Family sues each other, though. Megan flushed. Mr. and Mrs. Stewart, Judge Keller said, you are co-plaintiffs. Did you witness this verbal contract? Robert stood up. He looked tired. Yes, Your Honor. We heard her say it. She said, I will pay you back for everything you did for me. I gripped the edge of the table. It was painful to watch my father lie under oath. He wasn't even doing it with conviction. He was doing it because he was afraid of Megan. Judge Keller turned to me. Ms. Stewart, your turn. I stepped forward. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. Your Honor, there was never a contract. I said, I received a performance bonus at work 2 weeks ago. My sister demanded half of it, $20,000, because she has children and I do not. When I refused, she harassed me, contacted my employer to file a false HR complaint, and then filed this lawsuit. I opened my folder. I offered her a gift of $2,000 to fix her car, which she refused. I have never borrowed money from them. In fact, the financial flow has always been the opposite. I handed the bailiff my evidence. This is a record of the loans I have given my sister over the years, none of which were repaid, and this, I pointed to the old bank statement, is a record of an education trust left to me by my grandfather, which my parents liquidated to pay for my sister's down payment on her house. Judge Keller picked up the documents. She put on her reading glasses. The courtroom was silent. She read for a long time. Then she looked up at Diane and Robert. Is this true? She asked. Did you use the defendant's college fund to buy the plaintiff's house? Diane looked down at her shoes. Yes, Your Honor. But it was an emergency. And did Ms. Stewart agree to this? No, Your Honor. She was a minor at the time. Judge Keller took off her glasses. She looked at Megan. Let me get this straight, she said, her voice sharp. You are suing your sister for $7,000 because she won't share her bonus, while living in a house that was partly paid for with her inheritance? Megan opened her mouth, but no words came out. Judge Keller shook her head. She looked at me. Ms. Stewart, she said, I am dismissing this case with prejudice. There is no evidence of a contract. This is clearly an attempt to use the court system to enforce a moral expectation that does not exist in law. She banged her gavel. But before you go, she added, looking at my parents. She leaned over the bench. Why do you believe your sister's income is a shared asset, but yours is not? She asked Megan. At what point does she get to keep what she earns without being labeled selfish? Megan didn't answer. She just glared at me. Her eyes filled with hate. Case dismissed. Judge Keller said. I walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look at them. I walked out into the hallway, past the other litigants. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was lightness. The cord was cut. The debt was paid. I was free. The morning of the hearing, the sky over Brookhaven was a flat, bruised purple, threatening rain that refused to fall. I woke up at 5 o'clock. Though I had not really slept, my stomach felt like it was full of broken glass. I stood in the shower for 20 minutes, letting the hot water beat against my neck, trying to wash away the feeling of being a defendant in my own life. I dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. I chose a navy blue blazer, a crisp white blouse, and tailored slacks. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun. I looked like a project manager. I looked like someone who kept receipts. I drank a cup of black coffee, double-checked my folder, and walked out the door. The courthouse was an imposing brick building downtown, a place I had only ever visited to renew my car registration. Now, it felt like the Coliseum. I arrived 30 minutes early. I needed to be there before them. I needed to claim the territory. I sat on a hard wooden bench in the hallway outside courtroom 3B. The air smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I placed my folder on my lap. Inside were the 3 weapons I had prepared: my bank statements showing the exact amount of the bonus and my student loan payments, the cease and desist email I had sent, and the smoking gun, the bank records from my grandfather's estate showing the $14,000 my parents had siphoned off 12 years ago. I stared at the opposite wall, breathing in for 4 counts, holding for 4, exhaling for 4. You are the gray rock, I told myself. You are the evidence. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open. They stepped out in a cluster, moving like a single organism. Megan was in the lead. She wore a black dress that was slightly too formal, more suited for a funeral than a small claims hearing. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, likely from a night of crying or strategizing or both. Behind her, my parents trailed like reluctant ghosts. Robert was holding a thin stack of papers, his hands shaking slightly. Diane looked small, her shoulders hunched, clutching her purse to her chest as if she expected someone to snatch it. They saw me. For a second, the old instinct flared, the urge to wave, to smile, to ask how they were. But I killed it instantly. I did not move. I did not smile. I looked through them as if they were made of glass. They hesitated, then shuffled to the bench on the far side of the hallway. They huddled together. Megan began whispering rapidly to Diane, her hand gesturing frantically. Diane just nodded, looking miserable. Robert flipped through his papers. I caught a glimpse of what he was holding: handwritten notes on yellow legal pad paper. There was no binder, no spreadsheet. They had come to tell a story. I had come to prove a case. A bailiff opened the door. All rise. We shuffled into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, smelling of old wood and dust. There was no jury, just a few rows of benches and a raised dais. The Honorable Judge Keller entered. She was a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair cut into a sharp bob and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked like a woman who had heard every lie humanity had to invent and was impressed by none of them. Case number 405, Carter and Stewart versus Stewart. She read from a docket, her voice dry. We stepped up to the tables. I stood alone on the left. The 3 of them crowded behind the table on the right. Judge Keller peered over her glasses. I have read the complaint. Plaintiffs allege a breach of verbal contract regarding a loan repayment in the amount of $7,500. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Megan said. Her voice was breathy, fragile. She was playing the role of the wounded bird. And you represent yourself? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Keller turned to me. And the defense? I represent myself, Your Honor, and I deny the claim entirely. Very well, Judge Keller said, leaning back. Ms. Carter, this is your claim. Explain to me why you believe the defendant owes you this money. Megan took a deep breath. She gripped the edge of the table. Your Honor, she began, turning slightly to look at the judge, ignoring me completely. We are a close family, or we were, in our family. We have always had an understanding. When one of us succeeds, we all succeed. When one of us falls, the others pick them up. She paused for effect. My sister, Lillian, has always been the one we supported. We helped her through college. We supported her when she started her career. And for years, she sat at our dinner table and told us, I am so grateful. I will pay you back someday. When I make it, I will take care of the family. Megan's voice hitched. 2 weeks ago, she received a massive bonus, $40,000. It was a windfall, and per our verbal agreement, per the promise she made to us 100 times, we asked her to honor her debt. We are struggling. Your Honor, I have 2 children. We have medical bills. We just wanted her to keep her word, but instead, she laughed at us. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I am not asking for charity. Your Honor, I am asking for the repayment of the emotional and financial investment we made in her. We had a deal. Judge Keller listened, her face unreadable. She made a small note on her pad. Mr. Stewart, she said, looking at my father, do you corroborate this? Robert cleared his throat. He looked at the floor, then at the judge. Yes, Your Honor. Lillian always said she would help. We counted on it. Judge Keller turned to me. Ms. Stewart, your response? I stepped forward. I placed my hands on the table to stop them from trembling. Your Honor, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. There was no contract. There was no agreement. What my sister is describing is a fabrication designed to extract money from me because she is in debt. I opened my folder. I received a performance bonus of $40,000. My sister demanded half of it, $20,000, because she feels that having children makes her more deserving of my income than I am. When I refused, she harassed me. She contacted my employer to file a false report about my mental health, and she filed this lawsuit. I pulled out a document. I offered her a gift of $2,000 to help with her car repairs. She refused it, calling it crumbs. This is not a loan repayment. Your Honor, this is a shakedown. Megan gasped loudly. Objection, she cried. Watching too much television, Judge Keller held up a hand. Ms. Carter, quiet. Ms. Stewart, continue. I picked up the next document. Furthermore, Your Honor, the plaintiffs claim they invested in me and that I owe them for that support. I would like to submit into evidence records from the First National Credit Union, dated August 2009. I walked to the bailiff and handed him the papers. He passed them to the judge. These documents show that my grandfather left an education trust for both me and my sister. In 2009, while I was a sophomore in college, my parents, who were the custodians of the account, withdrew the entirety of my portion, $14,000, and used it to pay the down payment on the plaintiff's house. The room went silent. The silence was heavy, thick, and suffocating. I did not receive financial support from them. Your Honor, I said, they stripped my assets to support my sister. If there is a debt in this family, it flows the other way. Judge Keller adjusted her glasses. She read the bank statement. She read the letter Diane had signed authorizing the withdrawal. She looked up. Mrs. Stewart, the judge said, her voice sharp as a razor. Is this document authentic? Diane was trembling. She looked like she might faint. Yes, Your Honor, she whispered. Did you withdraw $14,000 from the defendant's trust to give to Ms. Carter? Diane bit her lip. It was an emergency loan. Your Honor, Megan needed a house. And did Ms. Stewart agree to this loan? No, Diane said, her voice barely audible. She didn't know. Judge Keller took off her glasses and set them on the bench. The click echoed in the quiet room. She looked at Megan. Ms. Carter, the judge said, you are suing your sister for $7,000, claiming she owes you for family support, while you are living in a house paid for with her inheritance? Megan's face was a mask of panic. That has nothing to do with this. That was years ago. She promised to help now. Judge Keller ignored her. She looked back at me. Ms. Stewart, did you ever sign a promissory note regarding this bonus? No. Your Honor, did you ever agree to a specific amount? No, Your Honor. Did you receive any money from the plaintiffs in the last 5 years that this could be a repayment for? No, Your Honor. In fact, I have lent them roughly $4,000 over the last 5 years, none of which has been repaid. Judge Keller turned back to the plaintiffs. The law of contracts is very specific. The judge said, a contract requires an offer, an acceptance, and consideration. Vague statements at a dinner table like, I will take care of you, are not contracts. They are sentiments. And this court cannot enforce sentiments. She leaned forward, locking eyes with Megan. Ms. Carter, I have a question for you. Megan straightened up, looking hopeful. Yes, Your Honor? Why do you believe your sister's work income is a shared family asset, but yours is not? Megan blinked. Excuse me? You claim that because you are family, you are entitled to her bonus, but I see no evidence that you have ever shared your income with her. At what point, Ms. Carter, does your sister get to keep what she earns without being labeled selfish? At what point does she get to have a life that isn't a resource for yours? Megan opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Diane. Diane was crying silently. Robert was staring at his shoes, his face a mask of shame. The entitlement I see here is breathtaking, Judge Keller said. You are using the court system to try to enforce a moral bullying campaign. She banged the gavel. Claim dismissed with prejudice. There is no legal basis for this suit, and frankly, plaintiffs, you should be ashamed of yourselves. The sound of the gavel was the best sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut on a long, dark tunnel. Court is adjourned, the bailiff announced. I gathered my papers. My hands were steady now. I didn't look at them. I turned and walked toward the double doors. Lillian! It was a hissed whisper. I stopped in the hallway, just outside the courtroom doors. Megan was behind me. She wasn't screaming. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, her makeup streaked. Diane and Robert stood behind her, looking like mourners at a graveside. You happy? Megan hissed. You won. You gotta humiliate us in front of a judge. I didn't humiliate you. Megan, I said calmly, the truth humiliated you. You have destroyed this family, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I hope you know that. Ethan and Chloe, they are going to grow up knowing exactly who you are. They are going to know that their Aunt Lillian cared more about her bank account than she did about whether they had braces. I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had worshipped when I was 5. I saw the fear behind the rage. I saw the woman who was drowning in $40,000 of secret debt, terrified that her world was collapsing, lashing out at the only life raft she could see. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I didn't destroy the family. Megan, I said, I just stopped paying for it. I turned my back on them. Lillian. Wait, my mother called out, her voice cracking. I didn't wait. I walked down the long marble hallway. I walked out the front doors into the gray morning. The rain had finally started to fall. A light, cleansing drizzle. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. 6 weeks later, the condo was quiet. It was a small place, just 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor of a converted brick building on the east side of town. It wasn't a mansion. It had a small galley kitchen and a balcony that overlooked a park, but it was mine. I had used the remaining bonus and my savings for the down payment. The mortgage was in my name. The deed was in my name. There was no family agreement attached to the title. I walked through the living room, running my hand along the back of the new gray sofa I had bought. The walls were bare. I hadn't put up art yet. The silence in the apartment was absolute. There were no screaming kids, no arguing parents, no group chat notifications pinging every 5 minutes. I made a cup of tea and sat on the small balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. I had beaten the lawsuit. I had secured my financial future. I had drawn the boundary doctor. Blake had told me to draw. But as I sat there, I didn't feel a surge of joy. I felt a heavy ache in the center of my chest. It was the ache of a phantom limb. I had cut off the infected part of my life, but it was still a part of me. I missed the idea of them. I missed the Sunday dinners before the tension started. I missed reading stories to Ethan. I realized then that freedom wasn't happy. Freedom was just safe, and safety was quiet. My phone buzzed on the small bistro table. I looked at it. I had changed my number, but I had given the new one to Jason, just in case of emergencies with the kids. It was a text from Jason's number. I picked it up. It wasn't text. It was a video file. I clicked play. The video was shaky, filmed by a child's hand. It showed a poster board covered in glitter and crooked handwriting. Ethan's face popped into the frame. He was missing a front tooth. "Look, Aunt Lillian," he said, his voice bright and chirpy. "This is my school project. It is about people in our neighborhood. I did you." He pointed to a drawing of a stick figure woman standing next to a square that was supposed to be a computer. "See?" he said. This is Aunt Lillian. She works with computers and she is the boss. He grinned at the camera. I got an A, he whispered. I miss you. Aunt Lillian. Bye. The video ended. I stared at the black screen, tears hot and fast running down my cheeks. I pressed the phone to my chest and let out a sob that echoed in the empty apartment. He didn't know. He didn't know I was the villain in his mother's story. He just missed me. A moment later, another text bubble appeared. This one was text only. Jason, but I knew it was Megan. I saw him send that. I didn't stop him. Look, Lillian, the judge was wrong. You know she was. But maybe we both said things we didn't mean. The house is a mess. The kids keep asking where you are. It is exhausting trying to explain why their aunt disappeared. The 3 dots appeared, hovered, and then the final message came through. So are you happy now? Are you happy with your money and your empty condo? Because we are still here. Struggling. But here, I looked at the message. It was half accusatory, half pleading. It was the door being cracked open just an inch. She wasn't apologizing. She was testing the waters. She was checking to see if the guilt had worked yet. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could reply. I could say, I miss you too. I could say, let's try to fix this. I could send $100 for pizza. It would be so easy. It would fill the silence. But I looked around my quiet, safe living room. I looked at the bank app on my phone, where the numbers were black, not red. I thought about the $14,000. I thought about the phrase dead to us. If I replied now, nothing would change. The cycle would start again. The demand would come next week. The guilt would come next month. I looked at the question again. So are you happy now? I wasn't happy, but I was whole. I typed nothing. I put the phone down, face down, on the table. I picked up my tea. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, leaving the world in a cool, peaceful twilight. I took a sip, and for the first time in 32 years, the only thing I tasted was my own life. Thank you so much for listening to Lillian's story. It is a painful journey, but one that so many people face. The moment when you have to choose between the family you were born into and the safety you need to survive. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with a family member over money? Do you think Lillian made the right choice in the end? Or was the cost of losing her nephew too high? Please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more realistic, emotional dramas about justice, family, and the price of standing up for yourself. Share your own stories below. I read every single one. Thank you for being part of this community.